Hello, everybody, and welcome this lunchtime to our talk on the MSc in Psychotherapy here in DCU. My name is Ray O'Neill. I am the current chair of the master's degree. Some of you may have already been in contact with me. So I know people are still joining in. Just to remind people again what Justin said, that this will be recorded, but being narcissistic, I've insisted that it would just be myself and my fellow panelist, Jiro Ogbavan, when she joins. So your own privacy is there. This is a webinar rather than a normal or usual Zoom call. You can ask questions through the Q&A box at the bottom. And again, those questions aren't recorded, and only myself and Ijiro, when she joins as co-panelist, will be able to see those. So look, thank you so much for taking this time. Hopefully it will be kind of beneficial. I'm going to first of all start by just kind of doing a run through of a PowerPoint, which hopefully will cover some of the core questions and concerns around the Masters in Psychotherapy here in DCU. If you do have any questions, like I say, just please feel free to just put them into the Q&A, and I'll try and keep checking that box and come back to the questions that you. So basically, this is our own information session just in relation to our 4-year Masters in Psychotherapy. Under both Coru's plans and current policy for accreditation bodies in Ireland, a psychotherapy training has to be 4 years. So that's why it's a 4-year course. It is part-time, so it takes place usually across 10 3-day blocks over the year, but there is kind of no quicker way to do it. Because so much of it is about the process rather than about the knowledge. So just it is quite a commitment to be actually making. It is the MSc in Psychotherapy is part of a range of courses and options that we have here in DCU. We also have a doctorate in psychotherapy for people who are already accredited psychotherapists. We also have a professional diploma in clinical supervision for not just psychotherapy and counselling, but many of the careers and professions that are leaning into supervision being a very beneficial educational professional space. We also offer modules. Some of you may be taking some of the modules in first year as a standalone module, just I suppose to have some experience. Our second year module in intimate relationships and our third year module in psychosexuality are also modules that people take as standalone, because neither couples work and relationship work nor psychosexual work are part of any other master's training course here in Ireland. So for other people who want to kind of learn a little bit more, that done a training elsewhere, they sometimes ask if they can do our courses. We also have master's and PhD programs that are just based on research. And we also have our Healthy Living Centre psychotherapy service, which isn't just a counselling and psychotherapy service that's available to the community at low cost, but also is a research centre for ourselves doing work around psychotherapy research and promotion. There's myself looking very well. Obviously, I dressed up for that photo, and I'm less dressed up today, but I'm literally just off a Dublin bus trying to get here on time. I can dress up on occasion. And my colleagues that are Gemma, Aisling, Alice, Stephanie Finan, and Stephanie Swales. We do have a preference for Stephanie's for anyone looking for employment here. Lilia, our administrator, who is I'm going to say everything. I could almost break into a song. She's also on the call, but she is absolutely the foundational rock, the wind beneath our wings, and all the other songs that I cannot think about just now. Just an invaluable source and resource. And I suspect between myself and Lilia, we have been your points of contact to date and will be throughout this process. So again, just to, as always, thank Lilia for her patience, humanity with me most especially. So just moving on specifically to talk about the Masters in Psychotherapy. As I said, it's a 4-year part-time program. By part-time, that's a university definition. So It's say in first year, it's 10 3-day blocks. In second year, it's 10 3-day blocks across the academic year. But in terms of, I suppose, the other demands and expectations, reading, preparation, personal therapy in second, third year, and fourth year, clinical hours, clinical supervision, and just the headspace that it takes up. This is a very, very engaged and I believe engaging course, but it does draw from you personally. So it isn't like I imagine you can put your astrophysics aside and kind of look at the stars and just go, isn't it a nice night? In psychotherapy, you're always being implicated as a therapist in training. And so it is quite full on. It is quite, as I said, engaging, potentially demanding, but always because this work itself, working with people around mental health questions, around their personalities, their selves, it has to be engaging. And so the psychotherapy training is really about ethically making sure that you're able and best placed to manage these kind of very deeply personal and intimate settings with clients. It's level 9, so it is regarded as a master's level within the framework. It's also recognized training by the IACP and by the NAPCP. These are two psychotherapy training bodies, and basically they will recognize the 4-year training course at the end. It's really important for people considering a 4-year training in Ireland to make sure that there's an accreditation body that recognises the course. We're not the only one. These two organisations are not the only organisations, but do make sure that if you have a preference towards an accreditation body, to make sure that this course will be on their radar, or if you're looking at other courses, to definitely make sure that they're recognised. It's called an integrative psychotherapy training because we kind of speak to, I suppose, many Bibles or many sets of knowledges. We don't proclaim one set of ways of being a psychotherapist. Each of the 6 core staff members, and indeed the additional staff that come into us as external staff, not on full-time contracts here with DCU, but still are supporting both us and the students, all come from different perspectives, different disciplines, different modalities, different biases. And we think that's the best way that ye can learn, by being kind of exposed, considering, negotiating different frameworks and different modalities. They kind of go, actually, this one is my strength, or this one speaks more to who I am or how I've learned. Or again, the ideal being that there's several things in your toolkit that can help you personally and professionally in both your formation as a psychotherapist and indeed in your work as a psychotherapist in formation. So that's a key thing. Again, if you're looking at other courses, and I would encourage you to look at other courses, I'm all about that speed dating. Don't make a commitment on the first table that you're at. Worked out for me. Do try and look at other courses and see strengths and weaknesses across them. And I suppose one of the strengths, those other people might view that as a weakness, is that we are an integrative approach. We do lean in to you deciding what disciplines, what modalities are best for you. It is a training to practice psychotherapy with adults, so not with children and adolescents. That's a degree of specialization. The focus is mainly on individuals, but we do have relationship work because so many individuals are either in relationships or looking to be in relationships or have been in relationships. It's always good to have the relationship angle, but if you're going to specialize into being a relationship therapist, that would involve additional training. And I think that's the thing, is it is a general degree and qualification in psychotherapy. What happens a lot of psychotherapists is that after their qualifications, they kind of look at specializing and leaning into different groupings, different modalities, different clinical settings, whatever it may be. But that's a question for after training. Again, as said, it's a 4-year part-time attendance. In years 1 and 2, this involves 30 days during the academic year from September to 18. 15 of those days are in semester one, so September, October, November, and 15 in semester two, January, February, March, sometimes into April, depending on when Easter falls. This traditionally has been Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, though this year we did explore the idea of this being on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as well. So this hasn't been decided for the coming year, but again, we just have to work around staff availability and room availability around that, though we are very, very conscious that people are leaning into their annual leave or study leave, parental leave in terms to manage and attend on the course. So where we can, we do try and deliver on Fridays and Saturdays, and we do them as one block again for people that potentially are traveling around that. Again, just to emphasize that the calendar for next year hasn't been decided. In years 3 and 4, the time commitment reduces from the second half of year 3. So the third years for this semester will only have either 1 day blocks or 2 day blocks. And for the fourth years, there will only be 1 day blocks. So, because you're leaning more into research at that point, writing a thesis or writing an article and being supported in that. So, you've kind of got your basic skills, you've got your introductory theory. Now it's really about you practicing and discussing your practice and working on that in supervision, both individual and group. So the load in terms of in-person days lessons in third year and in fourth year. Again, a key thing to say is that in addition to those learning days, teaching days in DCU, you also have to engage in your own personal therapy. This is something that's required of the accreditation bodies and therefore by DCU on the Masters in Psychotherapy, because you can only learn through your own experiences. And again, for those of you putting in applications, do speak to experiences that you've had of psychotherapy, hopefully positive, perhaps negative, or perhaps a range of those experiences, because the only way to actually be a psychotherapist is to undergo psychotherapy yourself. It's an essential part of psychotherapy training. The second thing is that there are clinical placements, and this again would be important in terms of where you get clinical experience. So these are the clients that you'd be working with from second year. Upon the successful completion of first year and a readiness to practice assessment, you then would start looking for clinical placements and look to collecting 300 hours between second year, third year, and fourth year. Just to be clear, you only lean into that work in second year on the masters. Other courses, they only do that in third year, that you'd actually start in clinical placement, but we feel that that's again a very, very rich place for theory to become practice. First year, understandably, a lot of theory, a lot of basic skills training, but second year, third year, fourth year, we want you to lean into your own clinical development, clinical experiences, and clinical questions. And because you're working clinically, you must have external individual supervision. So a psychotherapist that is qualified as a supervisor to help guide you with your work and practice. So the question just came in about additional skills practice. In each year, there is a module called PPP, handily called PPP1 for first year, PPP2 for second year, and you can see where I'm going with 3 and 4. And this would be a skills practice component. This is where you are talking about your skills practice or gaining skills practice or theoretical dimensions. And that tends to be one of the days in each of the blocks across each of the years. So in fourth year, that is the core course that you would do across fourth year as a group. All right, I hope that answered that question. So again, in terms of the course content, obviously psychotherapy theories, psychotherapy skills development, which again continues across the 4 years, and actually, to be honest, continues across your lifetime. I'm still learning skills, particularly in COVID when we had to adapt to new skills because of hybrid delivery or online delivery. The whole skills thing is constantly evolving and changing and developing. You have your clinical practice and placements where you're working with clients with recognized bodies. You have your clinical supervision, you'll have group supervision within your course on DCU, and you'll have individual supervision outside of the course, which again you must pay for, unfortunately, out of your pocket. I do want to acknowledge that this is a significant amount of cost. It is a huge investment in kind of self, in career, but I do not regret it looking back in any shape, way, or form. Your own personal development. Again, that is part of the training, part of the practices. You're always going to be leaning in to reflective work, what's happening for you, because you're such a key anchor within the psychotherapeutic space, but also your own personal therapy. There are a minimum of 20 hours to be done across each academic year. 80 in total. That's a minimum that's required. You know, there are some people that will approach that with a box ticking exercise. I've just done my 80 hours. And there's other people that will really, really swim into the experience. Eventually, there might be a lot of walking around the pool, but it's a very rich place to actually understand how clinics work. And obviously, there's a significant amount of independent study and learning across the modules, you know, because a lot of when the actual teaching deliveries are around skills and applications rather than necessarily didactic teaching and lecturing. That will be a part of it, but we do expect you to read materials in advance and around modules. So in terms of course content, in the first year, like I say, that's quite theory focused, and you're introduced to different modalities of psychotherapy, humanistic approaches to psychotherapy, CBT, cognitive and behavioral approaches to psychotherapy, psychodynamic approaches to psychotherapy, and integrative psychotherapy. So there are 4 different modalities that are taught across the first year. You also have that module, the PPP module that I called, which is where you're learning skills, where you're learning some of the kind of clinical applications around that work. And in first year, obviously, so much of that is going to be practice within the group, watching videos, learning with each other, from each other. Obviously, in second year, third year, and fourth year, those practice, you'll see there the professional practice portfolio 2 is being informed by your own clinical work on placements, as well as skills practice in class or theoretical issues, or, for example, questions around equality, diversity, and inclusion. In second year, you have another modality introduced, which is systemic approaches to psychotherapy. There's also a module on psychotherapy and mental health, a module on intimate relationships, which is around working with couples, dating, that part of people's lives, as well as working with couples. And again, new set of skills practices. Currently, there's a module on research inquiries, which is an introduction to how to do research. That potentially is going to be different for next year, just because we're looking and making some changes. So I'm working off things as they are at the moment in 24-25. And then in year 3, again, you'll notice the kind of workload and module load changes. You have the psychosexual therapeutic practice in third year in the first semester. You also have that professional practice portfolio again, continuing, and you also have developments around research. Just sorry, some more questions have coming in. So someone's asking about what you have to pay for. You have to pay for your own personal therapy. So that's your own personal therapist. You need to collect 80 hours. They don't have to be with the same person. A lot of therapists offer a lower rate for students who are training as psychotherapists. This will all be explained to in advance. It's in the Q&A information, but you also in second year, third year, and fourth year, you need to pay for your own personal supervision. So you'll have group supervision within DCU, which will be provided free of charge. Some of the placements offer group supervision, which again is provided by the placement, free of charge or at a minimal cost. But you need to have your own one-on-one supervision, which you arrange with a recognized accredited supervisor, but that does involve payment. So hopefully that answered that question. Then interestingly, somebody else has asked a question on body-centered or somatic approaches. That is a part of a lot of what we teach, but that is potentially going to be a new module in second year. So I kind of like the synchronicity of being asked that question. That is a module that we're hoping to introduce. But in the module in second year on, for example, psychotherapy and mental health, one of the key texts there is that Van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. The body is hugely, hugely important because we all approach this from a biopsychosocial spiritual dimension, that the body, the spirit, the sociology and the psychology interlink and intersect and influence each other. So hopefully I've answered that. Is there? Yes, I'm going to come to the question about exiting after year two. Yeah, I think that'll come up in a later slide, but if not, I'll come back to that question. Just to come back to the piece around year four, again, the clinical skills practice, applications is that module that you see there. And then there's research seminars to, again, help you with the production of a research thesis. And there also is individual research supervision. Okay. So that gives you a sense of the course content as it is at the moment. To kind of complete the course, you have, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. To complete the course, you have to have 300 hours between second year, third year, and fourth year. So that you will have 300 hours of working with clients. And again, obviously, in second year, you're getting yourself familiar with that. So potentially, I think it's 80 hours to complete second year, and then you're looking at a balance of 220 hours to complete across third year and fourth year. And this is why our graduates tend to be, held in a greater, well, let's just say in a different category, because you leave the course with 300 hours of clinical experience and you have 3 years of clinical experience. And that is something important. It also makes all the theory, all the practice so much more real when we lean on clinical examples. There's a 1-to-5 ratio. In other words, for every 5 clinical hours, you have to have an hour with a supervisor. So across those 3 years, when you're working with clients, second year, third year, and fourth year, you would need to have a minimum of 60 hours to meet those 300 clinical hours. That is an external contract that you will have, and it is an additional cost. Again, something to bear in mind. There are 60 hours of group supervision provided in second year, third year, and fourth year. That's within the program. So that is, you don't have to pay for that. That is part of your course. But again, the 18 hours of individual therapy across the 4 years does again need to come from your own pocket. But again, most supervisors and therapists will work at a reduced rate for students training as psychotherapists. There tends to be a recognition because they've gone through that themselves. Hang on. And there are 60 hours of personal awareness groups. So this is kind of process groups that happen within the actual course itself. And again, that's part of the course. That's not an additional cost. And then we like personal reflection, keeping diaries, reflective journals, writing reflective pieces, making reflective recordings. It's really, really important to stay in touch with who and what you are throughout. And so that will be part of each module. That will definitely be a part of your professional practice portfolio. And I'm just trying to see how I get to the questions again. So just excuse me where I do that. Okay, so another question that's come in. What does clinical supervision look like? It's sitting down. I'm going to give a very brief answer because obviously that I could talk a lot about that, and that would be something that you would be talking about across the course. But it's sitting down with an expert, a qualified, experienced psychotherapist who's worked in clinical practice and who's also trained very specifically as a supervisor to sit down and discuss your client cases, how you're doing, what's happening, interventions you made, interventions that you might have made, some of your fears and hopes. It's really, really important to kind of lean into, I suppose, an honesty and an openness and indeed a vulnerability. That's what differentiates psychotherapy from all the other psych discourses. Psychiatrists and psychologists do not have to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist in order to be those professions. But in psychotherapy, you do have to be a client of a psychotherapist. You do have to be a supervisee of a psychotherapist supervisor. So it's a space in which you discuss your clients in a kind of professional, confidential manner to the betterment of your professional development and also to aid with the clients themselves. It's an extra set of eyes. It literally is supervise, an extra set of eyes, not in some big brother Orwellian, restrictive way, but in a way that just gives you another lens in which to look at things. In terms of supports and technologies, there's the program chair, which is currently me. Each module has a module coordinator, a staff member that looks after that. There are personal tutors, somebody that will advocate for you if there are questions or issues around your academic support and delivery. And there's the psychotherapy program administrator, which is Lilia, who's on this call, and some of you would have been an email. There's also Catherine does be available as well. But like I say, it's myself and Lilia that will probably be your two core points of contact. Research supervisors for your research project, the article that you will write, you will have, again, a staff member who will support you in doing that work and in doing that. Again, placement staff, you don't go off and just find placements. There are a list of recognized placements that have agreed to do this work ethically and to support you in your clinical work. And this list can always be added to if, for example, for geographical reasons, there was not one close to you and you were concerned, but you knew of some agency or organization whose work is in psychotherapy and that you've no professional or personal connections to, you can always ask them to apply to us to be a placement. So that's an ever-evolving list of placements. Within DCU, we've got DCU Library, and again, great staff to help you around research work, around academic work, around accessing databases, articles, books, and they also have a writing centre to help with kind of written assignments. We also have a lot of virtual learning environments, VLEs, such as Loop, which again provides a huge amount of learning resources, contacts, links, etc., etc. There's obviously the kind of parent website of DCU where all things DCU are platformed, but the Loop thing is something specific where every course, like the Masters in Psychotherapy, and every module within that would have its own set of pages, information, conversations, etc., etc. We also have communication suites where we do video recordings of clinical practice, not with real clients, but practice situations with staff or with students that get observed to kind of see where strengths and weaknesses and moments of learning are. Okay, before I move on to that, I'm just, sorry, going to just check again with questions. All right, so there's still so I think I've answered the question around the additional skills practice component is part of the 3 days. So again, just to say that in case I haven't answered that question clearly, it's part of the professional practice portfolio, PPP as we call it, and that's in first year, second year, third year, and fourth year. And like I say, I just talked about the communication suites. This is one of the ways in which we kind of deliver skills practice within that module, which runs across the academic year in each of the 4 years. My colleague Jiro is here, so I'm just going to say hi to her and introduce her, if that's okay. Are you there, Jiro?
Hello, I am. Hi. Hi, Ray. How are you?
There are other people here, Jiro. It's a strange one because I can't see their faces, but they
No
are
worries. Hello,
present.
everyone. Hello,
So I
everyone. I'm
asked
glad to be here.
I asked Tajiro, I suppose, to join today, partly because she is herself obviously a psychotherapist. She is a very, very significant external staff member that I'm just so proud to have crossed paths with personally and professionally. And so she is one of our group supervisors. She is also one of the facilitators for the personal awareness groups, as we call them. They're the kind of process groups, personal therapy groups, might be another phrase that you would use. And she also has been an incredible lead around equality, diversity, and inclusion in psychotherapy in Ireland, both with her work with the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion with IACP, and indeed supporting me, pushing me, challenging me, because that's what psychotherapy is all about in terms of inclusion in Ireland. So that is something really, really important within DCU that we want within the psychotherapy community here to look, listen, attend to a whole range of people, persons, cultural backgrounds, intersectionalities, not just amongst our students, but because Ireland is changing. It's really important that this idea of white middle class psychotherapists being the presumed norm isn't the presumed norm, because they're not going to be the clients that you're going to be working with in 2024. When I did my original training back in the 19th century under Freud, because I actually am that old, obviously there was no ideas around equality, diversity, and inclusion because there was a presumption of a kind of normalized psychotherapist and a normalized client. And so myself and Ishiro hopefully will get to talk a little bit about this a little later. But also for anyone that is considering applying into DCU, that comes from different intersectional backgrounds, please know that we want to lean into this, learn more from our student body, from ourselves. It's not about being experts. It's not about everything right. It is that psychotherapeutic position around humility and curiosity. Okay.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. So, Ishiro, I'm just in the, I don't know if you could see that I'm doing a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to go back to that and hopefully finish that relatively soon. So, just with this, in terms of applying for the MSc in psychotherapy, you must have a relevant undergraduate degree at level 8. Okay, so again, because we do these applications at this point and we make our offers in March, April, you kind of have to have your degree completed by the time you apply. Because otherwise we aren't able, we have to make offers based on the information that we have at the time. So just to be mindful of that. If you're in any way kind of a relevant undergraduate degree is something that leans into social care, social work, psychology, nursing, education. A key thing is that you must have a minimum of 1 year recent, so it needs to be in the last couple of years, 2 years or so, professional caring helping experience that has included training around that professional caring and helping role and supervision. So, for example, being a volunteer counsellor, working with a helpline, working in social care, nursing, special needs teaching, guidance counselling, psychology assistant, pastoral care. These are the kind of experiences you must have a minimum of 1 year by the closing date of applications, which is the 28th of February. Okay. The majority of this experience needs to have been with adults, not with children and not with teenagers. And it does need to be verbal communication, not through text or email communication. So if you haven't got this, you won't be eligible for entry for this year. If it is something that you want to look at doing and applying for entry in a subsequent year, in 2026 September, can't believe I'm looking that far ahead, then we would encourage you strongly to start getting that 1 year of experience. It's just a great way to see whether the kind of responsibilities and the demands of being in that intimate, personal, important space of being somebody else's support in a one-on-one way is something for you. You have to complete an online application, submit 2 references, one an academic and the other a professional. And there's also a very specific personal statement. Again, follow the guidelines. You also need to include a scan of your passport and academic transcripts. All of that needs to be in by the 28th of February because there is quite a quick turnaround and we won't be able to be following up with people if they have bits and pieces missing. If you're awaiting something, just let myself and Lilia know so at least there's communication. Psychotherapy is grounded in clear communication, so do please communicate. Um, eligible people that will be selected will be called for an interview, and again that interview may happen on an individual and or a group basis. That hasn't been decided as yet. You can apply through what is called RPL, which is a recognition of prior learning, but you must give evidence of equivalence for the years that you've missed. So if you're applying into second year of the master's, you must show that you have the knowledge that was part of the first year course. Okay, so we'll talk about this again in a second. RPL application is submitted to the RMSC chair following the successful interview. So if you're going for RPL and you are eligible for recognition of prior learning, you still apply in the standard process. You would name this in the interview, and then provided the interview was successful, you could be called into the RPL process. But sorry, I just see questions again. Somebody's asking about a master's that could be considered relevant. I just email myself and just ask, and I'll kind of answer that question just in terms of whether your master's is relevant. Again, look at that slide. If it leans into those qualifications and backgrounds, which tend to be around kind of healthcare and healthcare related to humanities, then that is. Just the other question around not working for the last 5 years, I can't specifically argue that. A lot of would be about how you would present that and what has happened or been happening for you in the intervening years. So again, some of these questions I'm conscious around respecting data, protection of people's individualities. You can raise those questions with me individually, but a lot of it is around how you yourself can speak to your experience and argue that it does show a preparedness for working as a psychotherapist. So again, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Just let me, okay. So just again, in terms of the deadline, you apply online there. All of you should have this information. Like I said, the slides will be shared with you afterwards. The course is DC715. There's guidance in terms of doing that at that website. The important thing to bear in mind is the closing date is the 28th of February, and this is quite strictly, we cannot consider late applications. Incomplete applications where people are already applied and there's a document missing or something that they're waiting on, a passport renewal, just email me as chair to let me know that. Like I say, clear communication. But if applications are incomplete and there's no communication, they tend to be just discarded because of being incomplete. All right. Again, any issues or questions with that, do let me know. So again, just in terms of, this is the same thing in terms of what I just said, because most people will be entering into first year. If you don't have, there is an RPL entry into first year if you don't have a relevant undergraduate degree. But again, raise that question with me. You would just need to show life experience and professional experience that would advocate for you being eligible to move into. This is a policy for all universities in Ireland. In terms of year two, again, the important thing here is the second year student on the MSc are, because they're going straight into clinical work, all students applying into second year directly through RPL who have completed their interview successfully must then undertake and pass a readiness to practice, which basically is a skills practice session where we can just say this person is able to do clinical work, because you have to start your clinical placements ethically and professionally. We need to make sure of that. And as I said, you need to show evidence of meeting the requirements of first year. So you need to show I have some knowledge experience in those modules that are delivered in first year, which are humanistic, integrative, psychodynamic, and I've just forgotten the cognitive behavioral therapy. So, I've already done, a master's in psychology. That fair dues to you, but you need to show that the qualifications that you're presenting match the qualifications of the years that you've missed if you're coming in for recognition of prior learning. Okay, so again, similarly for entry into year three, you again have to do a readiness to practice. It's already assumed that you've done clinical work. So sometimes people leave a previous training course to move into our training course and they've done some clinical work. It needs to be a minimum of 80 hours of student in training psychotherapeutic work that you've done. And again, you need to evidence that you have similar modules and knowledge in your application that would meet the modules as part of the first year here in DCU and the second year in DCU. There isn't entry into fourth year, just to say. And this was the question that came up earlier on about, is there an exit route after second year? Sorry, I'm trying to move things around so I can see the full screen. There is, at the end of second year, you can exit with the graduate diploma in psychotherapy. Now, the important thing is this is an academic award. It's not a professional qualification. It is not recognized or to be recognized by CORU. But what it might allow is for you to, if you ever wanted to enter back into psychotherapy training, you could say, look, I've already got it at this level, and therefore through RPL, potentially enter into third year or fourth year. Again, there's no guarantee on that, but that's the idea behind it. But also some people go, this isn't for me to be a psychotherapist, or other things in life happen. And so they decide, I'd like to leave, but rather than leaving with, having spent 2 years of fees and 2 years of experience in life, you get an academic qualification, which is this graduate diploma in psychotherapy. To exit with that, you need to evidence the 60 ECTS credits at level 9, which basically means you've completed first year and second year modules and have passed each of those modules. That gives you the 60 credits. You can exit and return, as I said, to the MSc in psychotherapy or transfer into a different program. The important thing also is you need to have 100 clinical hours to complete, to exit with the graduate diploma in psychotherapy. So to complete second year, you need 80 hours. But if you want to exit the program with the graduate diploma, you need 100 hours. Do bear in mind that you have a maximum of 6 years to complete the master's in the MSc in psychotherapy. So in other words, do think wisely. People that are, with life issues or life questions, family, children, planning on starting on a family, planning on whatever it might be, there you can defer entry for a year, but you need to do the 4 years academically within a 6-year time frame. So again, that is just something else to bear in mind. Again, I'm just going to check the questions. No other questions, it appears, just now. Here is just an example of the program from first semester here, just so that again you can see around this. And again, this is just as a guide. This isn't how it will definitely be. We will start working on our timetable for next year in around March. And as soon as we have even a draft of weekends, we obviously will share that with the students, because we do appreciate we're in the same boat ourselves, trying to organize family, life, workloads, etc., etc. It's hugely beneficial, but we do have to wait until college has decided several different things. So that can hopefully will be available by March, April, even in some kind of draft format, or even if that is just to let you know about the weekends and the blocks of days. So again, just bearing in mind, you can see block 3 is online. So those 3 days there, the 17th, 18th and 19th of October, were all delivered online to students. So again, people didn't have to commute. People didn't have to travel. People were able to do that in a setting in which they felt secure and safe, and also they respected the privacy and the sensitivity of matters being discussed, like not something to do in an open space of a library, etc., etc. And yeah, so the online thing also in terms of skills practice, because since COVID, online work has become a very real thing for all psychotherapists. We do have to do online practice around skills. So that's why we do work online so that you can feel how different it is, its strengths, its weaknesses, its challenges, and its opportunities, because you can lean then into that experience and knowledge. Okay. And again, semester two in first year, similar with the 5 blocks across the year. So again, I am now going to stop the PowerPoint and I'm going to just check around questions if anyone has any questions, and I'm going to invite my colleague Ijiro, if you're, which I presume you're still there. Hey, Ijiro.
Hello, I'm still here.
You are
Hi.
indeed. I'm going to keep the questions and answers live just so we can see question. I think you can see them too. And I thought I'd just ask a question of both of us. Why did you become a psychotherapist? Why
Mm.
should someone consider being a I'm going to lean into the personal. You decide for yourself what's right and best.
Mm. Okay. I became a I became a psychotherapist really through my own challenges. I didn't go for personal therapy before I started the course. Um, I was curious about this aspect, so I did a certificate course in psychotherapy just to get a sense of what this is. Yeah, so my personal challenges really took me down this road, and that's really what I can share. But the certificate was really important. Just like I heard you saying, you might do 2 years and decide I don't want to do this anymore. That's quite an expensive 2 years to go through. For me, it was the cert, and it was Maynooth or one of the colleges that had a 1 year skills and introduction to psychotherapy. And that made me really sure that this was, so I pursued the degree after that.
I love your suggestion there around, because again, in terms of people strengthening their applications that perhaps don't come from a background of these kind of works, or the psychology or nursing or special needs education, etc., etc., those kind of backgrounds, certainly doing, like, whether it's an academic year or a certificate, something substantial, not kind of an online weekend thing like that. That's it's something, but something that's a little bit immersive and hopefully not too expensive. That you can
Yeah,
just kind of go, okay, this is going to add to my life skills and potentially my professional skills, but will give me a stronger taste of whether this really is for me. Because as you said, it is quite expensive, this
yeah,
course. It is, and I'm very, very, very conscious of that. Whereas that's a way of perhaps not putting too much expense into it and yet getting more than just a little hors d'oeuvre of experience, but a decent
yeah,
starter. And it
yeah.
strengthens your application. I want to keep emphasizing
Exactly,
that back for anyone that's
exactly.
watching this for future
Mm,
post 2025 applications. I'm
mm.
going to turn the question back to me because that just only feels fair, and also because I'm, a little bit narcissistic.
Oh,
I,
that's okay.
I fell into this, because I worked as a volunteer counselor, and I was working around a volunteer, around mental health support, working around marginalized communities. Particularly for me, this is in the 1990s, and a lot of it was around supporting the LGBT community because of what a very, very, very different Ireland in the 90s. And I suppose the pandemic, not only around HIV and AIDS, but also around loneliness
Yeah.
and around suicide amongst gay men. So that's kind of how I got involved. And I did do exactly like you did. I did a 2 year course, but it was kind of part-timey. And I dropped out after a year because it wasn't the right course for me. But
Mhm.
I definitely knew I wanted to do some more training and I wanted to learn some more around this. And
Mm.
yeah, so then I kind of moved more into it. And as I said, it's definitely been a life learning project. I see some questions
Absolutely.
in, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to jump to those.
Yeah. Just
And I'm
before you
going to,
go to the next question, Ray, I just want to say that there is if people are interested, there's something that is calling us to this this profession. So that in itself is something that we need to listen to.
I love, again, I really value that you say that. So I already feel my stock phrases are coming to the fore. That's why I hate listening to my own recording. And, I can hear myself saying, lean into this, and I really value what you're saying. Um, that desire to help people and to fix people is such a noble enterprise, but it isn't what psychotherapy is about.
Mm.
To me, psychotherapy is definitely around the wounded warrior, and that's what makes it unique in the psych discourses. And that's why our own personal therapy, our own honesty, our own integrity, our own reflective capacity, where vulnerability becomes a strength, where
Mhm.
self awareness becomes the guiding light. These are key to psychotherapy training. So, even though it's honorable and noble to want to help people and to fix people, this is a different kind of profession because frustratingly, you don't know oftentimes if you've helped or if you've fixed.
Yeah.
But you will know that you made a difference in some cases, but oftentimes they're not. Sometimes people turn up for one session, you never see them again, and you've
Yeah.
no way of knowing around that. So that question and that's lean into that in your reflective, in the personal statement that you're doing. Those of you that are applying any of the years, absolutely be explicit around what this means for you, because that
Yeah.
is one of the questions that will be asked out throughout the process, not just in application, but in interviews. Someone has asked a question here about what are the strengths of the DCU course over other masters in the same area. So obviously, I've got huge bias in this because I teach. Though obviously, I didn't do a training. My training wasn't here in DCU. It was in Vincent's Hospital back in the day. Um, I suppose the huge strength is that it like in terms of academic, it is within a university, and that has there's just more facilities, there's more things amenable, there's more of a student life for people that want to get involved, etc., etc. You are part of a university school and university community, and I think that's important to say in terms of supports and resources. The other thing I would say in relation to our course is I really value, and it is a strong selling point towards potential students, that we have a module on intimate relationships, which, as I said, gives you an experience of thinking around working with couples, working with two individuals around a relationship, but also brings in the relational aspect, whether you're single or coupled or divorced or widowed, that is such a part of everybody's life. And also that we have a psychosexuality module. Sex and sexuality are just such a huge part of our human existence, and we just don't talk about that as a culture and as a nation. And I really, really value that we have that module here, because it does change us as psychotherapists if we can move into a comfort and an openness to leading questions around sex and sexuality. But from your point of view as Euro, what would you say the strengths of the DCU course would be over different and other courses? And if there's weaknesses too, please feel free to share that.
Oh, I haven't intentionally compared, so I'm just gonna speak. Like you, this was not where I did the training. Um, I I'm not gonna say where. It doesn't matter where I say where I did my training. It doesn't. Yeah. Okay. So I did do a 4 year, but it wasn't a it wasn't an MSc. It was a BSc, because I kind of felt I wanted an experiential learning. I perceived, and rightly so, that the MSc, but DCU isn't, may be heavy in academic work. And I'm not an academic person. I just needed to understand, to learn, and the practice was really important to me. So I went for a BSc, which means I have two BSc degrees, but that's okay. So what I found when I joined DCU and the learning from this is the personal awareness group is just incredible support. I would speak for that because I am part of that group. And what I experience in that group is something I wish I had when I was in my own training. Also, the psychosexual is a course that isn't in all colleges. And I know it's like one thing to pick, but I have had students talk about their experience of that module. And as a supervisor, it comes into the room where students are talking about if they hadn't had that course or the training in that, what they would have and still do, they would have met with the client in a way that wouldn't go deep in the sexual aspect of things just because they would have been too uncomfortable to deal with it. But having done that, it just shows up now and again that it was a good cause. So personal awareness is just massive for me.
So I'm just going to echo both those things. Like I think personal awareness and process groups are a key part of any
Mm,
psychotherapy training. As it looks, we're still waiting on Coro to decide finalities. There's less emphasis on that in what Coro is sharing at the moment. But we in DCU and in other courses really strongly believe that that is so important. It
yes.
is our capacity to know and share our vulnerabilities, our
Yeah.
self-awareness, our humanities that create an opportunity for clients.
Yeah.
It's like if you're lost in the woods, the best person to trust is the person who has been lost in the woods and found their way out. And this is, again, I'll keep saying this, the difference between psychotherapy as a profession and psychiatry and psychology that come with manuals. In
Mm-hmm.
psychotherapy, it's all about life experience and kind of trusting into that much, much more. And just, I'm conscious, somebody asked a question there, thanking you, particularly Ashiro, for sharing about your own challenges being one of the reasons that you got into profession. And their question is, do you think one would be ready to study if they're working through their own challenges with a professional?
To be honest, yes. If you're not, if whatever you're going through is not so disruptive and you can create the space to study, I think you should go for it. For me, taking the course was like an expensive therapy session. So what I was learning, I was because of the reflection, I was doing the work. And that is what therapy expects of us, or at least the psychotherapy training expects that you do the work. So if you're challenged, going through the course would be a learning for you. And there is no better learning than you to apply something and experience it yourself, and you are ready with it to go support somebody else. So if whatever is going on isn't too disruptive, I would say you're ready to take the course.
Yeah. And again, I think that's why I use that phrase around the wounded warrior.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is somebody who has learned through life experience, whether their own personal experience or through family members or intimate personal friends. You just come at the kind of mental health question or challenge in a very different way. Not that you have to know everything. Like it's not, we wouldn't wish that people have different experience. I know when I do the piece of work around death and bereavement and grieving, sometimes the students kind of fall into two camps: those that have intimately known death and grief, and others that have never experienced a personal loss. And it's the conversations between those two groups that make it richer. So again, I like what you say. It's a great question this person has asked.
Yeah.
I would actually talk with my therapist about it if I was, or my counselor, and just say, look, I'm thinking, do you think I'm able and ready for this? And they will, because they'll have a better measure of that. It is personally demanding. You will get activated. I personally, as Giro,
Yes.
I hate the word triggered. I find it too weaponizing, so I try not to use it. But you are supposed to get activated, because if your threshold for managing those activations can enlarge, then there's more space for the client to be activated in the clinical work with you. So the more space that you allow for yourself, I hate the phrase warts and all, because warts and beauty spots and all, I'm going to say, the more space there will be for the client. And we definitely, definitely encourage that. Um, so another question that came in, I'm just checking, is how many international or EU students do this particular master's, and how international is DCU in general? DCU is very proud of being an international university and marketing itself not just within the European Union framework and with the United Kingdom, but also globally and internationally. So, in terms of the masters, because you have to be in person for at least 8 of those 10 blocks. Obviously, there's a significant travel cost for people that are coming in from other countries, but we do currently have students from Denmark, from France, from the UK, from Spain, who do have to go to that additional cost of actually being here in person. So flying in the night before a block or leaving the day, the evening of a 3 day block. So absolutely strongly encouraged. The one thing I would say is if you are applying from outside Ireland, again, that question I said at the beginning, make sure to check in with a psychotherapy accrediting body that they will recognize DCU's masters, because it is so, like, it is a rigorous, it's part of the Bologna Agreement within the European Union, but never presume anything. All right, always just kind of check in again. Okay. Please again feel free to ask any more questions. I'm just checking. Have I answered the ones that are there? I think I have. Okay. Ishiro, I suppose for me, the biggest challenge with doing this training back in the day was, I suppose, managing that personal dimension, because I did find so much of it activating. I also found it very, very difficult as an out gay man, and that's something you and I have in common. You know, when you're in a minority of one doing a course and nobody's taking responsibility or recognizing that, it's like a whole other emotional labor, and you and I would have sensitivities and awarenesses around that. Yeah, I found it. I was glad when the summer breaks came. I was really glad to, I suppose, have time for the snow globe that often would get shaken in my heart and in my mind, to just have a chance to settle. But I also know that if that snow, one of the reasons I left the course that I was in initially was it was just too academic.
Mm.
This is an academic qualification. There are academic standards, but so much of the learning and the assessment is experientially based, is group work based. It isn't exams. There are no exams, but there are written, oral, verbal, and group assessments to see you in your process. What would you say the biggest challenges for you across your training were as a psychotherapist? Whatever you feel
Referencing.
comfortable saying, as always.
Referencing. I hate academic work. And then having to, I could read forever. I could listen to everything. I could do the experiential bit. Having to sit down and do the assignment and then look for referencing, it almost killed me. It just was such a difficult thing. But what I loved about my training, again, the experiential part had as much value to the learning as the academic. So I allowed myself to be poor academically. I wasn't aiming for the A, because that would have been asking too much from me. But I knew what I was learning, and I made sure I was doing what I was supposed to do. But I allowed myself grace to fail in some aspects. Like, if you're going to take marks from me for reference, I'm like, no problem.
I'm smiling because I suppose that's the thing, because it's kind of an interesting and unique course, because any of these trainings, because there is an academic, it's really important that whatever training you do in Ireland as a psychotherapist, that it is recognized by both an accreditation body and that the degree is awarded by a university. That's my own bias and preference, because that future proofs you less a
Yeah.
private institute collapse in a couple of years' time if a university has either awarded the degree or recognized degree, that will stand to you forever. So that is just something that's important. Academics, like it is an academic course, but as you said, the experiential learning is actually a very significant part. And this, I think, for students that might deem themselves to be weaker academically, they're kind of surprised by the course because they're just like, oh, actually, there's room for me to have ideas and opinions, and I don't have to quote 432 articles in order to kind of have an opinion.
Yeah.
Um, and for students, paradoxically, students that are very academically inclined can get quite frustrated because they're like, why did I only get a 2-1 there? I get firsts all the time. And it's just like, well, this was a reflective piece of work, which is a different type of writing than
Yeah.
academic writing. Again, we offer rubrics in DCU and guidance around, and there's a whole mixture of different assessments. There obviously is a research project, a thesis that you do in your third and fourth year. But again, you get guidance and support on that. Referencing is important, but it isn't the be all and end all around that. Somebody's just asked another question around, and I think we can both offer an opinion or an answer to what kind of time commitment is needed outside
Oof.
of the actual attendance and therapy and supervision.
Infinity. Who knows? I think if I were to do, I just finished a diploma recently, and I went in with good intentions. Honestly, I said I was going to read. After the attendance, I wanted to allocate 2 hours a week to studying. It didn't happen. Um, and so I was always like catching or trying to catch up with work and materials. There was not that 2 hour commitment I would have loved to give to it. So I think it's difficult to say what is needed because that aspect of personal learning is also there in the training where you get really interested in whatever it is and you're learning because it interests you. So that is unlimited. You can read and commit as much time to it. But for yourself and your circumstance, it's important for you to have at least a minimum amount of time that you will dedicate to. For me, in this last diploma course I was doing, it was meant to be 2 hours. It didn't happen, but I would say I spent maybe 2 hours every 2 weeks if I want to put it all together. 2 to 3 weeks, I would, all the time I spent would have been 2 hours. I could have done better, but life happened.
And I think like it's a great question that's asked here because like I say, there's the kind of the psycho-emotional piece where if you're a big nerd like me, you're watching television shows, and I have been known to message my friend Giro when I'm watching a television show because suddenly some psychotherapeutic moment reveals itself or is asked. So like in terms of it getting into you in the best possible way and widening the lenses with which you view the world and question the world and appreciate mental health and appreciate personal development, etc., etc. That space hopefully is a good infinite in terms of your first thing. Logistically, and this is like the kind of formal answer, every module involves 120, I believe it's 125 hours of work. So of those 125 hours of work, about, I'm trying to remember, 26 of those hours are delivered in person. So in theory, for every hour you're in class, there should be 4 hours of preparation, of reading, or of, I know, Ishiro,
Oh my God.
and or of reflection. That's what
Mm,
the university, that's what the kind of standard practice. But again, some people will read more and listen more. And we've just such multimedia ways of learning now between videos and podcasts and
yes.
books. And there's so many ways to learn. So it really is down to yourself. I think a key thing is not to let things bottleneck on you. And
Yes.
we as a staff try to do this as best as possible so that all assignments aren't on the same day or aren't on the same week. Some of us, the assignment continuous assessment works happens throughout the block. So on the modules that I teach, you're doing reflective work throughout the module rather than answering an essay or whatever it may be. We also, our assessments are verbal assessments as well as written assessments. So there's a whole, we've really kind of trusted and developed around many ways of learning and many ways of interrogating, because it isn't we do no examinations per se, that kind of formal thing, but we are interested in, do you have the knowledge and how have you used the knowledge? What does this knowledge say to you? What does this knowledge say to your clinic? What does this knowledge say to your formation as a psychotherapist? That again is just an important question to ask.
So what did you find challenging, Ray?
I definitely found like some of the bottlenecks where you would have assignments due on top of each other, because unless there was the kind of the encouragement to space your learning throughout the, like, write up this for September, write up that for October. If it all happened Christmas week, that was just a bad Christmas and Tiny Tim cried. So I certainly find meeting the academic demands of essay, just one essay, quite exhausting. I think the challenge also was, I suppose, as an Irish man, I suppose leaning into the personhood and the emotionality. It's so easy to hide behind academics and knowledge and be very clever. And I am quite clever. But I was waiting for you to contradict me there. Um, and that's a great strength and that's a great resource, but it's also a brilliant place to hide. And I
Mm,
loved being challenged, but challenging it was, and it took years,
yeah,
to, I suppose, lean into wisdom and not just into knowledge, and lean
yeah,
into, I suppose, lack of wisdom,
yeah,
humility,
yeah.
and wisdom kind of beginning to formulate or pool there. But I found that, like, my ego took quite a bashing around some of the feedback I got in a good way. It was all constructively meant. And certainly, I think that that is the psychotherapeutic way.
Mm,
Anything that we say is intended constructively.
mm,
There's a generosity of spirit.
yeah. I love what you're saying around, the challenge of the course itself. Like what you're doing is challenging you in your personal experience. Um, when I started the course, my youngest child was just going into primary school. So she was just starting the school system. And I thought, you know what, this is a good time for me to begin my own journey of what I would like to see myself doing in the future. And Yalom's existential textbook, there's this his existential book. It's one of, I have never read a textbook cover to cover, and that textbook, I read that book. So one of my daughter's gifts to me, there was one time I think it was a Mother's Day card she was drawing. She drew the Yalom's book on the card to show you everywhere I went, I had the book. And in her tiny little mind, Mother always had this book, so the book was on my card. Just an interesting thing I wanted to share. So how much do you spend? How much do you read? Like it's ongoing.
And hopefully, like, it's atypical is what I'd say, that we have, like, we might have a set text that we would strongly encourage, but it's not like we have a reading list, where you must read these 20 books or whatever. There are things we recommend, and there's some core reading that we might do, but really it's how you engage with the material. And it's a collective learning space because we're all adults.
Mhm.
And so somebody's always going to suggest other, particularly because, again, I'm not in the internet. Well, I'm sure I am somewhere in the internet, but I don't occupy social media and things like that. So there's always these other podcasts or videos or links that people share,
Lots.
and they're brilliant for learning in kind of,
Yeah.
in a much more manageable, chewable way. what you said, Hero, because I don't have children, I never had to negotiate that balance of family, particularly children, with work. And I know that like it is an extra demand on you, on your relationship if you're in a
Yeah.
relationship, on your grieving if you're grieving for lack or loss of relationship, on your dating life if you're actively single. It is going to pull on you. It is going to be hard managing elderly parents, family of origin, children, etc. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Just to prepare your family and your partner and yourself in the midst of all that, that your availability shouldn't be taken for granted in the same way.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is attendance on the modules, because you have to be in, because so much of it is experientially based, you must have a minimum of 80% attendance to complete a module. If you don't have 80% attendance, then you will have to repeat the module and therefore the year at a later point. So
Mm.
again, just bear that in mind. That's why we try to share the diary and the calendar as early as possible. And like I say, as chair, I'm hoping to do that hopefully in March, by April at the latest, so that people can plan and organize their lives ahead. Now, things happen, things happen. Snow last week, just nature with climate change, that'll probably become a more regular thing, but also life into happens, sickness, illness, bereavement, family upset. You do have to be in class, but obviously we understand if you can't be in class, but we cannot let people go through modules if they haven't actually been in the experience of those modules. So do bear that in mind. I'm glad that we just got into that. The 80% attendance is critically important. Again, I'm conscious we're just at a quarter past. If anyone would like to ask any questions, and please, anything at all, please avail of doing that. And while I'm just waiting to see if anything happens there, Ishiro, what would you like to have known at this juncture where you were thinking of applying for a course? Is there anything that we haven't touched on? Like, there's the logistical information. We've kind of leaned into the personal and social, but is there anything else?
That I wish I knew before I started. Um, you have touched everything. I think if before you come into psychotherapy, don't if you don't understand the now as a therapist and with years under my belt, I totally understand the inner walking and all that. It feels like second nature to me. But if you didn't have any ideas around that, it can be a very unsettling experience. So the bring your tissue, lots of crying, lots of, just like something small is going to trigger something and you're grounded for like days. Like, I know we're saying it now, but you can't you can't prepare people enough for that. It's just, I know you would not understand this, but it's like having getting pregnant and having a child. Like, I can explain it to you, but if you carry a child and give birth, like, you'll be like, why didn't you tell me it was going to be so painful? We told you. But why didn't you say it was? But we told you. So experience is so different from everything you hear. So we can tell everybody everything, but the experience will still be, oh my God. So is there anything we need to prepare people for? I would say no, but you're going to be still shocked by the experience.
And actually, I love your analogy with pregnancy. Not something I've experienced myself, but it's so individual. And I suppose there's the kind of rational, logical information around here's what happens in the first trimester, here's what happens in the second, here's what happens in the third, here's what happens when you give birth. And we have the logical, rational information, and then the experience
Mm.
is just so vast, different, similar, intersecting, etc., etc. So I love that analogy because You will have your own experience of a psychotherapist, and so you should.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's lots of supports around doing that. But it does ask something of you, particularly our course in DCU. It
Yeah.
does ask for you to turn up for yourself in an authentic way. And there are other courses that don't demand that or expect that or invite that in quite the same way. And that could be an advantage for other courses and potentially a disadvantage for DCU. But that is something, it is going to ask something more of you. Just another question just came in there. Is there a heavy demand on being able to use the DCU library, just being based outside of Dublin around the course? There isn't a heavy demand. The great thing about, I think, most libraries, but certainly DCU's library, is so much of the resources are available online. So you can download books online. You don't have to actually read them. I'm very old school. I love my paper books. I struggle with screens because we spend so much time on screens. I love paper. I love printing out. I know it's not great for the environment, printing out articles and writing them, etc., etc. But there isn't a demand on you being in the library. The library is an actual resource, a great space for study because it's a, it's a quiet space, it's a private space, but it's also a great resource. That's available online. So you don't have to worry about having to be in the library. Also, loans for undergraduate or for postgraduates tend to be semester loans for most books. If books are very popular, they might be 2 week loans. And sometimes you can renew, unless somebody else is waiting for the book, you can renew the book loan online. So you don't have to go to the library. You can manage that through your account. But if they are looking for the book, and it is a 2 week one, then you do need to get it back. And the blocks tend to be around 3 week apart. But in general, most postgrads tend to have what are called semester long loans, just to answer that question. Okay. So again, just checking in if anyone else would like, because just we're in the final few minutes here. And what I might also, I suppose, is it is incredibly rewarding and it is a huge investment doing this. It is 4 years of your lifetime, in which, like I say, life can intervene. It is a huge financial investment. Someone just asked the question around, are there any financial supports available? Um, Again, the answer is like go to the SUSI website, the Union of Students and the Department of Education around grants, etc., etc. It's the frustrating thing is because it's a part-time course, a master's course, postgraduate course, it limits the number of funds that are available. So sometimes people have leaned on work supporting and asking for kind of support, not just in terms of getting like study days leave or whatever, but depending on who your employer is, they might support you financially. It's certainly worth asking. But in terms of financial supports, make contact with the student support services here in DCU, make contact with the Students' Union, and make contact with the SUSI website to see what financial supports are available, as a lot of those are income to based. So might be there for people who are struggling financially, which in this day and age with house prices and rent costs, I think is so many more people. But the challenge is the course is a part-time course, which takes out of a lot of the government schemes. But go to Susie, go to Student Support Services and the DCU website around that. But yeah, that's the other thing is I suppose I frame it as an investment. I know as part of my training, like every training, you have to do personal therapy. Obviously, I was so resistant for lots of reasons, not least of all, yeah, the money thing. I was just like, this is an extra cost. And I was just so outraged. And it was all resistance. But I got a gorgeous reframe off somebody else in the group. And they said, look, rather than giving out about how much this costs, could you reframe it as how much money you're spending on yourself? And they were like, think about how much money you spend on alcohol and going out at a week. And then, look at that. Could you reframe this as something you're buying yourself rather than something you're spending on somebody else. And I have never looked back since then. I've always seen personal work, personal development, personal therapy as such a profound investment in myself, which has allegedly revealed a couple of good turns for the better in my personal and professional life. By way of closing, Ishiro, is there anything else that you would like to say by way of information or invitation?
I would say, good luck to everyone who's on this call. Hope you got something that you were looking for and that you have all your questions answered. If it was up to me, I would say take the journey. It it's incredible to take the course and then to be in that on that other side where you're helping people in the therapeutic space. It's just a gorgeous opportunity. So I would invite you to put on I don't know how in my culture we'll say tie. It's like the cloth we wear, we call it a wrapper. So when you're preparing, you tie your wrapper, and get ready and go into it. So I would say, tie your wrapper, bet everything you've heard, the cost, it's really expensive, all of it, but put it all, tie your wrapper and go into this would be my invitation.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, like, we are doing this information session in January. I know some of the students that are already on this call have planned and organized and perhaps been in touch around this. It is a process. It is a process applying for the course. So get into the portal as soon as possible, start your application, get all your documents in place. And if for any reason you aren't eligible, for example, around not having the 12-month required experiential work around this field, then start on that. Like, don't, it's not something urgent. There's so much urgency and demand in our culture. Sometimes I have to do this year and I have to. And if that happens, great. But if it doesn't happen for whatever reason that might be, and I think that's something to emphasize, we tend to get about 120, 140 applications for 20 places. So it is quite a high demand course. Get feedback from the process and see what you can put in place for next year. You know, do look at other courses for just that comparison, for that information. There are strengths and weaknesses to all courses. If you are traveling, particularly if you're traveling from abroad, just allow in those kind of times. And just, I really want to thank my colleague and friend Jiro for being present. This is the generosity of heart and spirit that is so much some of the people that we work with, where Jiro's here on her time as an external employee, giving up her time. This isn't contracted hours for her because she believes in this process, because she believes in psychotherapy, and she believes in meeting and working with and alongside good psychotherapists in training and good psychotherapists. So I really want to thank
Thank
Ishiro
you.
particularly for this time. And I really want to thank all of you that are here this afternoon for again giving up your time or indeed your lunch break. And for anyone watching this recording afterwards, if you do have any questions, do look over the PowerPoint. Do look into the frequently asked questions that both myself and Lilia would have shared there. The information is there, and absolutely best of luck with your applications.